to do. Couldn't be a warrior. And very often when we deal with these kinds of resource issues, it's kind of a focus on a salmon or in the whale or a bear, etc., without really getting into what that means, how all of these resources, if you want to call it that, are just totally embedded in and integrated in all aspects of a tribe, and it becomes what the relationship between a man and Gary Ray in this film talks about it as well, that it's what guys do, it's what men have to do to be a macaw or a crow. And when the resource is gone or they're prohibited from using the resource, the impacts just go way beyond, if you will, the kind of caloric intake that, now you can eat corned beef, instead of whales. So, is everybody on?
I can hear you.
Okay, Micah.
Looks like Greg's muted. There he is. I'm on.
Okay.
Is everybody up?
Everybody's on.
Okay,
Okay. Should I start?
go ahead.
Okay. All right.
We should start with who's who.
Say again?
We should start with who's who.
Oh, well, let's start with Micah. You want to introduce yourself? And then Greg.
My name is Michael McCarty. I'm former chairman of the Macaw Tribal Council and been an artist as long as I can remember. Always looked up to Greg Colfax's artwork. It's been a big inspiration to me. And I found my way into a lot of intergovernmental policy circles relative to protecting the treaty resource environment.
Okay, Greg.
Yeah, Greg Colfax, member of the Macaw tribe. Been on the Macaw Whaling Commission for its inception. And I'm a carver. And been a carver for a long time. But I've also had the opportunity to be on my school board, which I'm very, very proud of. Spent over 20 years in that position. And I can say that the board was able to turn around our school system. I'm very proud of our school today and our teachers and administrators that we have. And so that's me.
All righty. Micah has participated in the past with some of our roundtables, and Greg has been one of the featured speakers in our film program when we did Dead Man, right? Yeah. So we got a history with these guys. I got to say one thing though, Micah. Watching that film, certainly we're a lot younger in that film.
Time keeps on moving.
One of the things I mentioned in my note to you guys is that when I first went to Alaska, up to Barrow at that time, working with some of the villagers up there. One of the things that was absolutely kind of key in my experience was one, how important whales were. Because I started off in Seattle, and the word came down that they got a whale. They got the first whale of the season. Then we got up to Barrow, or we got to Anchorage, talked to some folks, and it says, you know, the big news is we got the first whale. And I got to Barrow, and they were, you know, cutting up the whale and distributing it amongst the villagers. That was one thing, just the centrality of the whale to all the people. It didn't matter if they were in Anchorage. It didn't matter if they were in Seattle. That was an important event in for that season. The other thing I noted was that the whaling captains were not just whaling captains; they were also key personnel, leaders in the regional corporation. They were key players in the school system there. A lot of the governmental institutions, they were part of that. And but that changed. Over the years, they became less involved in, I know in the regional corporations, where you got you know, the MBAs, the business guys, the economic development folks, and you could detect a shift in how it operated. And so the question, if we could start with Greg, okay? So,
All right.
it's a whaling captain is, you can say that's about whaling, but there's more to it than just going out and getting a whale or getting a couple of whales. There are a whole range of responsibilities, of obligations in that position, social, cultural, political, etc. What are some of those obligations or responsibilities?
So they were chiefs. They were chiefs. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay. And so they had chief and responsibilities for the people, for the village, and for making sure that there was enough food for everybody, and everybody was protected, and you know, they had a job to do, and they ran the village pretty much, and they had special guys, you know, who enforced things and kept the law, and so yeah, they were very, very important people, and despite the fact that, you know, we ran out of whales, that didn't diminish their responsibilities to the village. They kept up with their tasks, you know, that they had to do. They were raised to do these things, and so they instinctively knew what to do. So yeah, there was a time when we didn't have whales, you know, they all got hunted out. But now they're back. How about Micah?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. responsibilities, and they also had a responsibility to each other and the other villages. That just reminding ourselves that 5 villages had houses of whalers, and in addition to running our villages, we had a responsibility to the ecosystem, the habitat of our culture, thinking of the literacy of our territory and the business sense of what it meant to manage wealth. Like Greg was saying, right, brother, when it wasn't just whales. When the whales were gone, we still had to manage the wealth for our people. I think in times progressive, since then, the identity of our people, that zenith aspect of our leadership created a really powerful identity. And even with the devastation of smallpox and colonialism, we still been able to transcend a lot of that to the integrity of who we are and where we come from. So I think of things then and now, you know, on my times in council, often I strive to, well, it's been years now, but harken back to, you know, reviving a mentality to strengthen our resolve for the changes that we've transcended. So I think about times like the balance of the ecosystem is different, and I think in terms of today's policies, we're dealing with the inflexibility of what they call sacred cow legislation, and the Marine Mammal Protection Act is, there's powerful forces to keep it just the way it is, even though there's more marine mammals than endangered salmon runs can support. We can manage ourselves, but we can't manage an overabundance of California sea lions that come up into Washington State, and they're all adult males. And if they're all adult males and it's a learned behavior, then it's an invasive species that's up here decimating endangered salmon. So we have a conflict of national legislation in the Endangered Species Act being vulnerable to the inflexibility of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And so there are people that are choosing to do nothing because they're afraid of the polarity and Uncle Sam's bipolar disorder. Enough on that, I guess, for now.
Yeah, the folks in California right now are, it's not quite the same situation, but they have an overabundance of black bear. And, you know, one of the proposed solutions is to hunt more bear. But bears have advocates, right? Not just the PETA folks, but they're people who really like bears. And so we don't see that as a choice between, for example, mountain lion and black bear. But basically, they're competing for that same kind of resource base. And the bear are more prolific, and they're much more efficient, it seems. But related to that is, I guess, the question of, okay, the California invasion of sea lions right. Are they the kind of marine mammal that was traditionally used by the indigenous peoples up in the Pacific Northwest? Because it seems to me one of the obvious solutions is to basically eat more seal. Does that make any sense?
So because there was no more whales, we jumped on seals and ate seals? Is that the assumption?
No, not the whales, but in addition to whales, because the treaty speaks of seals as well.
Oh, yeah, it sure does.
Yeah. I think in terms of integrated resource management, and we think in terms of the literacy of a territory, the literacy of a space, and in our case at Makah, it's an adjudicated marine space, and we have a bit of an adjudication yet to do for territorial or terrestrial hunting. But when we look at it in an integrated resource management concept, it's a little different than what people would say. I guess one analogy would be a poor analogy, but there's a spreadsheet of the whole territory. And if we think of it in the terms of a four-dimensional model, where we can actually visualize, this finite space that is the habitat of our culture. There's topographical maps, there's the three dimensions, and then the fourth dimension being temporal. One of the unique aspects of our territory is that it's one of the 5 most dynamic marine ecologies on the planet for productivity and biological diversity, and it's inclusive of very robust populations of domicile species that live their whole life history in the area, and then we have a lot of highly migratory species. And so, in terms of ecosystem-based management with those kinds of dynamics, single species protection in the absence of a conservation necessity really handicaps proper management of an ecosystem. And when we think of, the invasive species of adult male sea lions abandoning their females and their pups to come up here to gorge on endangered salmon, we're seeing a really huge ecological disaster right before our eyes, and we haven't even begun to address this, even by pulling the trigger of paralysis by analysis. We haven't even, we need to have an environmental impact statement of them not doing anything, let alone how do we approach this in a sensible way. And I think, at a very localized level, I think the Makah Tribal Council and our Natural Resource Division is probably the most well-equipped organization that I think we all can understand. We have more room to improve our effectiveness in terms of state tribal co-management of the ecosystem under the guise of phase 2 of the Bolt decision, which brings in the necessity of protecting an environment that supports a treaty resource. So then we can put the lens of the treaties as effective environmental laws and leverage public policy at the state level so that the tribes aren't standing alone, or the Makah tribe wouldn't be standing alone to point the finger at inflexible federal policy, so that we can work towards a trifecta of the state, federal, tribal nexus to be more effective at what we're doing. And in a lot of ways, we have to tell the feds how to do a better job as a co-trustee And since the advent of tribal self-governance and how some agencies like to have the jurisdiction of having the lead agency status in an intergovernmental process, there's some decision tables that need to be shaken up, and some people need to be shown a better way of looking at things in a more holistic, pragmatic, and comprehensive way.
Okay. Thank you. You have any comment on that issue, Greg?
Well, when it comes to seals and sea lions, in my time, and I think in my dad's time, sea lions were not eaten. I think if you go back far enough, the 1800s, 1700s, yeah, I think some of them would be taken for food. Main species for food was the hair seal or the harbor seal, but not only for us. You gotta add up all the people that lived, along the coast from the Columbia River up to here, go in sound, count all the people down to Olympia and all the way up to Bellingham and then all the way around there, down the Vancouver Island. You come up with like 20,000, 30,000 people, and then you realize that everybody's eating seeds. And so one is always cautioned only take what you need, but everybody was eating seals, and now they're not anymore. So that's one of the main problems. And the trouble with the seals in sound is, I've eaten quite a bit of it. My family has. My children were raised on smoked seal meat and patuk and things like that. But there was people who tested those seals in sound, and their blubber was not edible. It had too much pollutants in it. And the meat was okay, but the blubber wasn't. And so there's, when you look at it from a management point of view, if you had 20,000, 30,000 people, living on hair seals or harbor seals as one of the sources of food, and then you take that away, you end up with a lot of seals. And that's what we have today. That's what Micah was referring to. And when you got these tiny little steelhead smolt, going out of the rivers, going out into the ocean, who greets them? A whole bunch of seals, man. And it's and then just for a brief moment, I'm going to go to the steelhead for a second. The steelhead, they run out on the ocean chain, the south of the ocean chain, and then they're down south where all the squid are. Well, they have squid nets down there. They're 20 miles long. And so we do know that those little steelhead go through those nets because it leaves a scar. It totally circles around that fish at their main big fin on the top, on the back. And you can see it. And I've seen it. And all the fellows that I have talked to on the rivers, who spend a lot of time fishing, catch a lot of fish, they've all seen it as well. So we're losing steelhead in a lot of different places, and one of them is in the squid nets south of those islands. Yeah. But back to seals. Seals are pretty tasty. There's a certain way of cutting them. There's a certain way of treating them. It's not hard. And you take care of them, they take care of you. whales. We had an opportunity a number of years ago to greet a humpback whale on our beach. It got impacted by a freighter, and we told Noah, I guess, you can come in and take your samples if you want, but when you're done, we're going to properly take care of this animal and show it the greatest respect. And how we treat it, how we take it apart and share it among ourselves. Even the words that we talk among ourselves about this beautiful animal. And so I have to tell you, that was pretty tasty. That was one tasty whale. Yeah. You know, compared to a gray whale, you know, gray whales, yeah. But humpback whale, oh. Yeah, those humpbacks are really tasty. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So, I don't know what else we can talk about on that, but go ahead.
Well, I had a second set of questions related to the place of whales and really other species in the art of the macaw. Okay, because if we talked about the exhibit here at the museum right now with the orca, and they've got some fabulous pieces of carving, of sculpture, and the thing that comes to mind for me almost immediately is that when you look at the imagery now as someone who is appreciative of the art, but really ignorant of its meaning and its place in the lives of the people. One of the things that strikes me at first is that it's abstract, it's stylized, right? You've got some carvings where a whale looks like a whale, but if it's an image on a carved box or some other fabric, it's very, very stylized and abstract. And the question I had for you all was, has that imagery evolved throughout the history of your relationship with the whale?
You go first, Greg?
I was hoping you would.
The only thoughts that I had in that question would be, I guess, relative to, I guess, maybe a relearned or post-colonial awareness of different species from being, I guess, less abstract and more iconic. And I think of some of the traits of Utah macaw work where some of our silhouettes of our designs are pretty accurate if you just look at the silhouette of whatever we're observing and we put that into design work. But I think in terms of designs would evolve, I think, in ways in which I personally would illustrate certain concepts around what are the other examples of apex predators. And I think of hunter-gathering society and the hereditary responsibilities of a territory that we have a kinship with different species that we share territory with. And I guess in terms of a relationship and an illustration of that relationship, one of my favorite designs, which I feel like I'm still evolving just as I try to manifest this design to the spirit of what I was taught through different histories. And Greg, you probably have heard this one from people I haven't met yet because you're older than me, but the killer whale wolf transformation of the kind of orcas that hunt marine mammals as opposed to the orcas that would only eat the fish. That there was a treaty between the wolf and the killer whales because they became so efficient as predators in their territory that they lost the thrill of the hunt. And in order to renew that challenge, they agreed to share territory with each other. And the only way they could do that is to take each other's form. And so I haven't fully fleshed it out yet, but I've got different ideas of the wolf into orca and the orca into wolf as two different origins to share territory with the partnership. And it speaks to the things I spoke earlier about the literacy of the territory, the literacy of our land and our sea, that our wolf society and these wolves of the sea that are the greatest hunters we've seen on the ocean, aside from the thunderbird.
Yeah, well, the stories do not evolve. You know, the stories that we've learned and heard, you know, they're constant. The evolutionary effect on how we carve, how we paint them, the design-wise, well, there's other effects that enter into it. The movement of people, the movement of tribal people going all over the world, all over the planet, and coming back home. That changes your perspective, you know. Look at the perspective, Maca's perspective, and how that changed by World War II, when all those men came back home. That was a big change. And so I don't see too much of a big change in the artistic styles that go on with drawing a whale, let's say. I don't see it too much. We've all learned, form. We've all read Bill Holmes' book, Style of Form, Northwest Coast Native Art. It's all been, everybody's got one, and everybody's looked at it, and everybody's used parts of it in some way, some shape or form. The only way to change that is to go into the museums yourself, in the same way Bill did. He had the whole Burke Museum to look at. And as Native artisans, though, you are welcomed in these museums to go through their collection. And not just the parts that everybody sees in the front of the museum. You want to go down in the basement.
Yeah.
The attic. That's where you want to go. You want to go up there. And you got to wear the gloves, and handle the piece, and you look at it, you turn it upside down, you look at it from it is expected of us to be contributing leaders and to be a help in our communities. So regardless of what we claim we are, people look on us as artists. More than that, we are thinkers. We are problem solvers. We are individuals that will enter into problems and work together with everybody else in what's called tribalism. In tribalism. You hear that word, disparagingly said by many, many, many people. But tribalism, that's everything. That's what holds us together. And I really dislike hearing that term being used in such a negative way, because it holds us all together. That's how I feel about it.
I agree with what Greg just said. I think about how this prevalence of grievance politics has nothing to do with sound policy relative to resource management, human resource management. And grievance politics creates different camps that get misused with the term or misrepresented by that term, tribalism. I think of ancient cultures, and I like what Greg said about how an artist really evolves is by sort of that decolonial observation of hands-on experience with the older stuff, because we're still, and I think in some ways we're piecing things back together from what was taken from us. And so we may have sharper tools and sharper pencils and sharper this and that, but those influences from World War II, as Greg was saying, that our world has changed. We're still with the bones of our ancestors, but our world has changed. And so who we are and where we come from has a sort of a different backdrop in today's world as opposed to our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers.
Okay. Jean has a question.
Yeah, Greg, we have a nice slide of the sculpture you made.
I didn't hear that.
The way, can you hear? I'm sorry.
If somebody can repeat it, that's closer to a mic.
I'll come up. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. We have a nice slide of the sculpture you made, the whaler's wife transforming into a whale, and we just put up on the screen. I wonder, could you talk a little bit about the meaning of this piece and how you came to make it, how it came to be in the museum in New York?
Okay. You gotta go back. When my thinking started, hey Micah, was that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge?
Yeah, Addison versus Evans.
When he wrote his opinions, he introduced it by copying a paragraph or two from Moby Dick.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that? Okay, so this guy, this judge, and he writes his opinion, but he introduces it by a couple of paragraphs from Melville's Moby Dick, implying, of course, that macaws are whale hunting, returning to whale hunting, in the same spirit of that novel. And that novel has nothing to do with Native American life. That's feminine. But I've always wondered, how am I going to reply to that through carving? And so, as time went on, things about how whaling families go about their business. The husband leaves, she retires back to her sleeping bench. And then the women, they cover her up with mats, and she doesn't move. You know, for as long as her husband is out there hunting. Because it is believed that how she behaves is how the whale meant for her husband behaves. And there are stories that have come back where a husband is saying, I couldn't get the canoe in proper position. The whale was always moving around just out of reach. It was at the wrong angle. Come to find out, his wife running around, picking berries, going down the beach, getting clams, getting firewood, doing something, besides staying still. And so that became one of the requirements of a wife, of a whale hunter. But it was dangerous. It was truly dangerous because her experience was so mystically powerful that there was the danger of her actually transforming into a whale. Just like a wolf transforms into a killer whale, or a steelhead changing into a snake. There are many, many, many stories of transformations in Indian country, and this is just one. And so, the piece that I did depicts that moment that the change was taking place, and that her human face was turning into a whale's face, and that her hands and arms were turning into a flipper, and the tail was forming, and then the fin. And of course it all had to have pulled together, and so I pounded a lot of bark for that piece. I took a lot of bark. I was really surprised. But that's a story behind it. It's a story of transformation, which is integral to all religions on the planet. Somebody in some religion is always transforming into something. That's what makes it a religion. And so Native peoples also held that. I'll throw this little bit in extra. You're not expecting it, but here it comes. Christianity is a religion of forgiveness. Islam is a religion of justice. Buddhism is a religion to end constant sequences of human suffering. Judaism, that's a religion of questioning and discovery. Macabre religion is a religion to avoid starvation. And we know starvation. All Native peoples do. We've all inherited the genes that you inherit from individuals who have survived starvation. That makes us a little bit different in how we process and handle drugs and alcohol. And so that's also what I wish to speak to with this carving, with this transformation of this woman, this wife. Unfortunately, is transforming into a whale and will leave forever, never to be seen again. That's a great sadness, and it's not the purpose. But it happens, and it has happened. And as you go through different reservations, all the way from Barrow, Alaska, all the way south down to Terra del Fuego, you'll hear stories of transformation. And there's an odd similarity between all of them, between the ceremonies that go on in the East Coast, Boston, New York, up in Canada. Then you head south down into Florida, go around into Texas and south into Mexico, Guadalcanal, and you know about Guatemala and all of those. There's an incredible similarity, a religious so that's what that piece is about. It's about that.
Greg, oddly enough, I have a piece not exactly similar, but Mayor McQuillan told me one time of how the family got rights to hunt humpback whales was one of the chiefs had a daughter that he married off to the chief of humpbacks, and so I did this mask of a humpback whale back in her human form, and thinking of it, the sadness part of it, that she had to be removed from her home village. She may have had her eyes on a human man, but she was married off to a whale. And so in my own imagination, I had an image of her singing off the coast of Wyatch in her whale form, because she came back home to her, to where she was born, homesick. In her whale form, she would sing. And I put a storm over her on the forehead design, and ironically, it's really similar to Charlotte Cote's Indian name, which I believe comes from the Bay area, Quotismia, and it means bring thunder, or carries thunder, something like that. Yeah.
I appreciate the question and the responses, because it gets to a question I had, which is that for someone who comes in from Denver, Colorado, and gets up to Neah Bay, or visits your studios, or sees one of y'all's work, I can appreciate, if you will, the kind of the artistry. I can appreciate the craftsmanship, right? The aesthetics of it. But to really understand what that work means to the people of Makah really requires a different kind of knowledge, right? Because generally, if you go to a museum, you got a 3x5 card that talks about the artist, the title, the date and the date of acquisition, and that's pretty much it. So you get in there, you see it, and it is like, wow, it's beautiful, but you got to know. And you got to know at a kind of a different, just a different level. So, and does that kind of knowledge, that depth of knowledge, is that something that's required of people from Makah? Or is that part of their everyday, if you will, learning process, so it becomes part of their mother's milk? Or is there somebody that has to teach kids this knowledge?
Well, I think it varies family to family, although our school system, Greg mentioned the school board years, we've maintained a pretty strong cultural backbone throughout our school experience for our children, from Head Start that the tribe operates through the public school. And so I believe through that experience and our annual Makah Days practices, that there is a level of competency, I guess, at a scholastic or community-based level. There is a baseline, I believe, and then each family has various stories and histories through through different challenges and die-offs and whatnot. You know, we don't have everything that we had 3 or 4 generations ago, but we have a lot, and we learn from each other, and we have a lot of intermarriages, and there's a lot of intertribal stories that have pieces of our own history. And since 89, I believe, the state of Washington was celebrating its 100th birthday. And a couple things developed out of that. One was a paddle to Seattle that turned into an intertribal canoe society. And on the governance side of things, we have developed what's known as the Centennial Accord. And it really goes back to the foundation of statehood, and the fact that for a prerequisite for statehood is the ability to fund public education, which only came through treaties. And so when you think in terms of the manifest destiny and the fact that the treaties that became Washington State, the conveyance of that can be termed as the capstone of the manifest destiny and the state of Washington being named after the first president. You know, I think in those kind of terms, you know, in the sense of, you know, what is a junior government? What is the flow of powers of the treaty? Like, we did not have certain rights granted to us that we already possessed. The federal government didn't have the authority to give us something that we had already. And so I think of that in terms of, you know, what we gave to the United States was the ability to form a state under the statehood requirements. And I guess my point being there is that the levels of you know, the foundations for these teachings, they're all interconnected. And, you know, the purpose behind keeping the living culture, you know, is I think consistent with like what Greg was saying earlier, is that because there was no whales didn't mean that our treaties meant nothing. You know, the treaties recognize an inherent sovereignty and an inherent identity, and it's legal in its foundation. And in certain public policy arenas, particularly with statehood and you know, and social justice and equality, some would counter, you know, the notion that Indians have special rights and that they are race-based. And you know, I think in terms of what that would mean to a child growing up on the Makah Indian reservation and understanding the different kinds of designs and animals and songs and that cultural connection. One thing that I strongly believe in is that everybody that rides in those canoes for the canoe journeys and everybody that attends the Centennial Accord, we're starting to see more tribal leadership on the canoes, and we're starting to see more sovereign identity in our education. I had a unique opportunity to speak at the 10th anniversary of the Living Breath symposium around food as our medicine at the University of Washington. And one of the things we didn't have back then, going back over 10 years ago, is we didn't have a tribal food sovereignty movement as we did. And because of Makah whaling being a food sovereignty issue, among other facets of the, you know, what it means, you know, I had been invited to some of the steering committees to form this symposia. And looking back at it now, we can see that there are actual college level programs that are built into food as our medicine, food sovereignty. And the connection to those resources also manifested in one of the last grants that I signed as chairman in my last year, 2011, 2012. We did a community transformation grant, and in that community transformation grant that we brought in nutritionists, acupuncture, and other preventative modalities, because if we look back at, even before the treaty was signed, we had a second smallpox epidemic that was intentionally timed at a point when our traditional diet had been compromised. And the observers of our community recognized that we fell sick easier to the common cold and flu. And then in even today's Western medicine or U.S., almost 90% of healthcare issues are diet-related and therefore they're preventable. Even during the Obama administration, there was a lot of African-American movements that were bringing back diets from Mother Africa that were finding success in alleviating diet-related hardships like heart disease and other things, diabetes. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah.
On tangents, but I try to move it back. Anything to fill in there, Greg? 'Cause I went pretty far and wide.
Okay. We're going to open it up for audience questions as well.
Go ahead.
Micah and Gray, can you hear the audience from this mic?
Yes. I heard, that's from the audience, I heard it.
Great, here you go. Here's your first question.
Hello, it's been delightful here talking to you guys. We have a similar problem in southeastern Alaska, where they want to now put the Chinook, the king salmon, on the endangered species list. And we're fighting that as best we can. We know the real problem is not us, but the trawlers who are reducing the fish stock, and probably climate change too. So I can understand what you guys went through because of that. Also, I appreciated your artist's comments. I have a family that's divided on traditional art and more modern forms of native art. And I think it's always important to realize that you have to include the particular artist and his vision when you talk about native art. And that it comes from a person, not from the culture itself, but we live in an age when the artist is important. Our most famous artist, Robert Davidson, has now included the color yellow in his works, which was unheard of just a short time ago. But he is the first man that will tell you that to understand the art, you have to understand the old masters. So thank you for your comments, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Any other
That's what you
questions?
said, Greg, about getting into those museums. You got to understand the masters.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one museum I haven't been to yet, and that's the Fields Museum in Chicago. There's a number of pieces in there I really, really want to look at. But I have enjoyed the Peabody Museum, that's in Harvard, the Peabody Essex, that's across town there, spent some time in there. The Denver Art Museum has some nice pieces from Niamey.
Oh, cool.
I believe they collected some pieces from Hal Peterson. And there's a real famous one that's been in a lot of books, and it was carved cabin boy, a Spanish cabin boy in one of those sailing ships, and he was unusual, feature-wise. You know, it was so unusual that they made a carving of him, and that was pretty cool to see.
I think I've seen that picture.
Yeah. But now we're just talking Mike and Greg, so. Yeah, so let's open it up to more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, now it's Micah, Greg, and Jean, because I have a question, Greg, for you, because you make transformer masks, and I was just wondering, pardon me?
I can do them, yeah.
You can do them. So the question I have was that something that you were taught, or did you learn that from going to museums and looking at old pieces?
Yeah, both. And then there's, you can see a picture of it, and knowing that there's a human head inside there, that limits what you can, put together. And so it's the outside hinge material that becomes important. And how do you create that? And so you just keep looking and you find these old pieces that are made that way, and you look at what the fellows back then did. And they didn't have a hardware store to go pick up parts at, But they did have pieces lying around their house. They had material, old dresses that couldn't be worn anymore, but could be torn up and made into, some kind of binding things. There was one piece in Peabody, I believe, that the eyes were wine bottle bottoms. They cut the bottoms off. They made eyes out of the wine bottle bottoms. And so you can realize that the fellas were, they were scrambling around looking for what they could use to make it work. And they did. They made it work. I don't know if that answered your question. Anyway,
Yeah. Other questions from the audience? I have a question for the audience. Who here has seen the movie Dead Man? Nobody. Oh my goodness! You have to rent this. It's a Western like none other. Directed by Jim Jarmusch, stars Johnny Depp and Gary Farmer, and among the last scenes of the movie, they're in Macaw Village. This would be, I guess, in the 1800s, and they brought Greg on to create an authentic Macaw Village, and there's just some fantastic carving. The whole building facade that he carved. So now that you've met Greg, you'll need to rent the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the last scene, there's a scene where Gary Farmer's trying to get a canoe for Johnny Depp. So Johnny Depp, he's wounded, and he can make his escape because he's being chased. And so, and unfortunately, the village has just experienced an attack, and so there's bodies lying around and all that kind of stuff. And but one of the requirements of the job was, there was this false wall that represented a longhouse, and it had a gabled roof, so the wall was 50 feet long, 20 feet high at the peak of the gable. And so they wanted a carving to fit there that had a wolf head on the bottom that opened up on cue, and then actors would then walk into it and walk into the building. And so that was one of the requirements of that job. I had to do it. But also design the wall itself. 50 foot by 20 by, I think, like 15 on the ends. And so they wanted that all painted up. Luckily, all I had to do was design it, and they had a painter there that was just outrageous. That guy just blew my mind. He was able to take what I drew and then graph it onto this huge wall. And then within like almost 3/4 of a day's work, like 6 hours or 7 hours, he had the whole thing painted. It was just, I was just like amazed. But anyhow, this pole, I carved it out of foam. And it too was like a transformation mask. It just had to open up and the jaw dropped down, which was a kind of like a gangplank for the actors to walk on, and then the top part rolled up. It gave them room to go in. But when you see the thing open up, I'm in the back, and there's this other guy on the other side. We got these 2x4s that operate this whole thing. And so on cue, we were looking to the guy on the far side, and he gave us the cue to open it up. So when it opens up, I'm in the back, pulling on this 2x4, and then everybody walks in. And when they're all in there, I've got another cue to close it. So me and this other guy are operating these 2x4s to close the thing up. It was it was a lot of fun, I'll tell you. And when I got done with it, which was right off the side of the set that the filming was done on, my responsibility was over. It was then the responsibility of the carpenters to take my carving and to put it up. And they broke it. They broke it. And so, because it was going up like this, right? And they had these sticks that they were pushing, and then it went like that. And so they really moaned really loud, and they apologized forever and a day. So anyway, we got the piece, and we put the first piece up, and then we got the element, put the element on, and put glue in there, and glued the whole thing together. And it worked. And it only had to work a couple of times, and then the whole thing was done, and everybody went home. And but when Johnny Depp and Gary Farmer land on the beach and they go to enter into this village, you'll see 2 hooks on the side. You'll see a hook, and that's the spirit of the drowned. Now that was my thing. I had this block of foam, so I said, Johnny Depp's kept, he's going to drown. He's going to die in the ocean somewhere. And so this would be a nice premonition kind of thing. This is an introduction to the idea of his dying, done in carving. In carving, so I carved this 6-foot tall hook that's outside the door of this village, and you'll see it only for a brief second. Oh, the other thing. There's another thing there that Johnny Depp's name in the movie was. Any of you guys remember? He's a famous artist, the British, 17th, 18th century. Anybody got any clues? Ideas?
Got me.
There's a lot of his art deals with people floating around and stuff like that. Well, anyway, you'll hear it in the movie when you go see the movie. You'll see his name and go, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. I remember his art. Well, when the wolf head opens up, there's a design on here, both sides, that's reflective of that name of that artist. But it's done Northwest Coast style, so it's kind of hidden in there. But if you know the artwork, it just kills me. I can't remember it right now.
Someone in the audience knows William Blake?
William Blake.
There you go.
Yeah, I remember that name now.
William Blake. Okay, so William Blake, you know, you look at his artwork, there's a lot of flying people. A lot of people in the air floating around and going this way and that way. So when that piece opens up, that wolf head opens up, look for the design that's on it. That's a reference to William Blake. And, but Jim Jarmusch, I don't think he knows about it. He didn't know my little secret things that I was doing. Maybe drawing, because I really liked the idea of what was going on, but I wanted to add to it some physicality, you know, to the nature of this whole movie. And so I had the opportunity to carve, and since I was lead carver, I just threw it in, and I disguised it in one sense. But if you know the artwork, the art world, you'll see it. Okay, that's I'll leave it at that.
So wrap up. Huh? So I think we're coming just about to the end of our time here. Merv, did you have any last thought?
Just one last question. What's the future of Makah art look like to you guys?
The future.
Optimistic?
I think it looks pretty good myself. I think it looks pretty good. There's, you got this museum here. This is big. This is really, really big. There's carvings in here done by people who knew nothing of anything else besides, you know, this area, this place. They put into their, and we have as an example, they put into their design work and in the forms that they use, events and things that they saw. They saw these things in heightened states of mental perception. They were trained for doing that. And they had medicine, specific medicine for it, which nobody talks about. And I think it's good. The art world is expanding by many other Native artists as well. You got glass artists. There's a really good guy. I can't remember his name right now offhand, but he's really good. And I think those are avenues for us to follow. There's also bronze castings. There's marble. Why don't we carve marble? You know, what's wrong with that? You know, there's many areas that we can go to express our tribal identity, the identity that we share with everyone. Micah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think of Preston Singletary, the glass artist. I just did some big steel artwork with a plasma cutter, taking our form line design with a plasma cutter. Has been interesting. But I really do have a strong affinity for, you know, our community. I know, Greg, you've been a huge part of it. I think of like what Frank Smith was doing in the community, and then our collection of amazing weavers. I think per capita, our little town of Nia Bay is really rich in artists. And so I've got a lot of positive vision for generations to come are going to be amazing Makah artists. And I know I've got 5 children and they all do artwork. And so I wasn't raised around Makah art as much as I probably would have liked to, but the benefit of being an artist as I became a parent is that my children were raised around a lot more art than I was exposed to. So I had a pretty steep learning curve early on, growing up off reservation, but I do remember in Olympia public schools, instead of putting my name up on top of all my math assignments, I drew a Thunderbird and
All righty.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. We have an art exhibit as part of our Indigenous Film and Arts Festival in October. It opens on October 10th at DU, and we have one of Micah's pieces in the exhibit. It's a canoe paddle, a beautiful painted. It's your Firehawk paddle. So,
Oh, cool, thank you. Oh, Greg, that Firehawk was inspired by some of the talk around the cultural burning to keep the prairie down by Rosette, open from the woods.
Oh, yeah, yeah, the cranberry bogs.
Yeah, yeah.
And probably more things as well, places for the elk.
Yeah,
Snack, yeah.
So thank you, Greg and Micah, for joining us. We appreciate you sharing all your time and your thoughts. Thanks to our audience for joining us. And
Spend time with you, Greg.
Same here.
All right, and everybody, appreciate Merv and Gene.
Okay.
You guys are doing great work in Denver, and appreciate the attention of the audience.
All righty.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Micah.
Take care.
Now, we'll do.
Thank you, all of you. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.